That's why the traditional advice given for weight loss doesn't work, because we tell people, eat less, exercise more. Sure, you maybe lose a little bit of weight in the short term, but all that does, you've given them the perfect recipe to promote hunger. And hunger always wins. If a person's attempting to shrink their fat cells or lose weight, if the first step is, I'm going to cut my calories, and they don't address their high insulin, they're never going to lose weight in the long run. They're going to step right back to where they were.
If you're trying to lose weight by counting calories, you might be wasting your time. There's a hidden switch in your body that decides whether fat cells shrink or grow, and it has nothing to do with how much you eat. Metabolism expert Dr. Ben Bikman explained that fat cells in our bodies don't grow because we eat too many calories. They grow when insulin levels rise.
So I grow fat cells in Petri dishes in my lab. Right now, back at BYU, I got students growing fat cells in the incubator. They are swimming in a culture medium filled with calories. Everything the fat cell needs is all the calories that fat cell could ever want are around it right now. And yet they're teeny little cells. They're not getting big at all until we add one thing. And the moment we add insulin into that culture, now the fat cells start to get big. If we check them 6 hours later, there's a big lipid droplet. 6 hours still later, it's even bigger.
Clinical evidence also shows how insulin affects fat cells and drives weight gain. In other words, it proves that the root cause of obesity is hormonal, not just behavioral. So if you're trying to lose weight, counting calories or pushing through intense workouts might not be your best bet. What really matters is using metabolic strategies that help lower your insulin levels. That's where real progress begins.
In fact, humans provide the most convincing evidence of all that you cannot get fat unless insulin is elevated, because one of the more common eating disorders among young people with type 1 diabetes is a condition called diabulimia, which is this terrible, tragic scenario where the person feels such pressure to be lean, and they have learned that that little syringe of insulin is the absolute gatekeeper of the fat cell. So they will deliberately underdose their insulin in order to stay as thin as they want. They can eat as much as they want. And as long as they underdose their insulin, and it's not even at zero, they're just doing a deliberately lower dose, they will be as skinny as they want. Now, there's metabolic hell to pay, right? They're hyperglycemic, they're getting into ketoacidosis, so they're dying, but they'll be as thin as they want. So as much as people want to say, no, it's just calories, we have a human case study that absolutely proves that wrong.
Many experts consider fasting one of the most effective metabolic tools. But Dr. Ben Bikman points out that fasting is highly individual and not always practical. It also takes preparation and discipline. As an alternative, he suggests something much simpler called the insulin trick. The idea is to outsmart your body through specific eating habits that help control insulin levels. For instance, most people don't realize that right after waking up, your insulin is already high, a phenomenon known as the dawn effect.
As we begin to approach waking up in the morning, cortisol levels climb. And that serves a very good function. It's supposed to happen. It's natural in everyone who sleeps. Everyone. So a few hours before we would wake up, about 4 a.m. or so, cortisol levels start to climb, and it climbs quite a bit. And that's thought to be a result of the fact that as the body is starting to wake up and the brain and the nervous system is coming online, back online, and metabolic demands of the body starts to rise, if cortisol goes up, it's going to be promoting the liver to start breaking down all of its stored glycogen and releasing that as glucose into the bloodstream. So commonly we'll get an elevation in glucose as we wake up as well. And so that's why in the morning, some people may find that they are a little more insulin resistant, what is a very common feature, and why I am inclined to say that morning is a time of insulin resistance.
Even people who skip dinner as part of intermittent fasting often see little effect, because the time right after waking up is actually the most dangerous for fat gain. Any food you eat in the first 2 hours is more likely to be stored as fat rather than used for energy. Why? Because your body is going through a hormonal surge, especially cortisol and insulin. To avoid this, you need to wait it out. Don't head straight to the kitchen the moment you wake up. Your body gives you a natural burst of fast-burning energy first thing in the morning. Use it. Spend 20 to 30 minutes planning your day, going for a short walk, or diving into some light work. Your brain and body are at their peak. take advantage of that window. Then, when it's time to eat, slow it down. Don't go for a sugary, carb-heavy breakfast. Make it a mindful ritual. Let the smells, the sounds, and the process of making your meal ease your body into digestion. This approach helps reset your metabolism and sets the tone for a healthier day.
I would say the simplest strategy would just be change breakfast tomorrow. Overnight, fasting is incredibly therapeutic. Insulin will come down during a fasted state, and that sort of resensitizes the body to insulin. So in the morning, you've finally been fasting overnight, insulin has come down. The last thing you want to do is spike your insulin with a starchy, sugary breakfast. And of course, tragically, breakfast is almost just a dessert nowadays all over the world, where it is just like pure dessert. It's pure sugar and starch. I would say change breakfast tomorrow.
Dr. Bikman also points out that cortisol levels are tightly linked to your circadian rhythm and stress. If you don't get enough sleep, your body perceives it as stress. As a result, your morning cortisol can be 2 or even 3 times higher than normal, pushing insulin higher too. When that happens, it's harder to stick to your routine. You'll feel hungrier, less in control, and more likely to crave sugary foods.
Cortisol's metabolic effects do affect the brain, and there it influences appetite and food cravings. And wouldn't you know it, it particularly increases cravings for carbohydrates. Cortisol crosses the blood-brain barrier and once again binds to glucocorticoid receptors in the hypothalamus and the amygdala. These are both regions involved in hunger and reward, so people feeling good about what they're doing. Now, in the hypothalamus, cortisol upregulates a protein called NPY, neuropeptide Y, and another one called agouti-related protein, AGRP. And these are increased in response to the glucocorticoid response elements. And when they're activated, they stimulate appetite. At the same time, cortisol inhibits leptin signaling, reducing satiety potentially. But separate from that regulation of appetite, in the amygdala, cortisol enhances dopamine release, so increasing cravings for very palatable, energy-dense foods.
That's why it's important to cut out anything from breakfast that could spike insulin. And that includes more than just carbs. Even coffee can be a problem. Dr. Bikman explains that caffeine can raise insulin, especially when combined with carbohydrates. In the morning, cortisol is already high, pushing more glucose into your bloodstream. If you drink coffee first thing, it can cause a sharp insulin response, even without food.
Now, I want to highlight this particular study here. It was published about 20 years ago. What they did was document the degree to which caffeine increases the insulin secretion when someone eats glucose or when you eat carbohydrates. When we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar levels will climb, and insulin will need to go up in order to reduce that blood sugar or bring it back down. When you couple that carbohydrate load with a high amount of caffeine, you have to have much more insulin. Insulin has to work much harder in order to clear the glucose.
That's why it's best to hold off on coffee in the morning. It keeps your hormones balanced and prevents early damage to your metabolism. At its core, Dr. Ben Bikman's insulin trick is about understanding how your hormones behave. The best time to take advantage of that is in the morning. It's the one part of the day when insulin activity is predictable. Later on, things vary. That's why it's crucial to get your morning right, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. The balance between cortisol and insulin shapes your appetite and determines whether you're more likely to overeat. A well-timed, balanced breakfast kickstarts fat burning and tells your body to use energy instead of store it. Dr. Bikman's trick isn't meant to be dramatic. It's a starting point, but it's a powerful one. It puts your body in a state where losing weight becomes easier and more sustainable without extreme effort.